Hello, music fans. Welcome to Death by Unicorn, a channel where we talk about metal rock and prog music. And this is my first video of 2025 where I'm actually going to talk about albums that are coming out in 2025. I'm still not really done all my 2024 year-end content. I put up some of it, I have some more planned, but there's always great music coming out, and I want to talk about 15 albums that are coming out in January 2025 that I plan to listen to in the order that they're coming out, starting with Echolyn with Time Silent Radio 7 and Time Silent Radio 2. I guess this is actually technically two albums. Not sure if it's two albums, if it's supposed to be two albums or a double album. It's kind of weird that it's a part seven and a part two. I think it would be Echolyn's 10th album. They're an American symphonic progressive rock band. And I haven't heard this yet. It's only early release and download of these are available now for Kickstarter supporters, but the official release date for everyone else will actually be in March, so that's when I'm going to hear it. But if you love Echolyn and you want to be a Kickstarter supporter, I imagine that you could still do that, and then a you get access to it now. So check that out if that's a band you like. To be honest, I've never heard them. I'm really excited to hear them. I've heard great things. I'm a big prog rock fan, so it might be a bit surprising that I haven't heard anything by Echolyn, but I just haven't heard them yet. So I definitely plan to check this out because I know they're well respected in the prog rock community and excited to hear what all the rage and the fuss is about. And now the two that I've got in orange here, I've already heard because they came out January 3rd. First one I'm going to talk about is Acacia Ridge with their album The Deviant Era. This is the second album by this American band, and it's kind of progressive metal. I don't know if it's progressive metal core. There's not that much core. Maybe I'll change that. It's like progressive metal, gent, got some hard rock influences. Um, and I've never heard anything by them before, but I listened to the title track ahead of time and then decided to check out the album. It's an excellent song. The whole album is very catchy progressive metal with genty, syncopated guitars, rhythms, and groovy riffs, mostly staying in 4/4 time, but having complexity to the rhythms, big choruses and poppy vocal melodies for fans of Tesseract, Leprous, Artificial Language, Sordid Pink, Relica, Capstan, Vola, and Alter Bridge. But even catchier than a lot of those bands, like as catchy as like pop punk bands like Blink-182 or arena rock choruses from the 80s hard rock bands like Journey, Boston, and Def Leppard. The vocals in Acacia Ridge remind me most of Capstan, Artificial Language, and Leprous. They're high pitched. They have kind of an emo post-hardcore vibe, but they don't scream much. There is a moment here and there where there is the odd scream. The guitars remind me most of Tesseract in that they sound simple and groovy at first, but when you listen closely, they do a lot of subtle, intricate things. If that sounds good to you, check out Acacia Ridge and their album, The Deviant Era. And I'm going to put that one in my excellent tier. Great way to kick off the year. This is the first new album of 2025 that I listened to, and I'm already impressed. Next up, another one that really impressed me that came out on January 3rd, 2024. It's called Am I in Trouble? Or the artist is Am I in Trouble? And the album title is Spectrum. This is the debut album by this American project, and it's post-black metal with avant-garde metal, progressive metal, and post-rock influences. It's a solo project where the music is written, produced, sung, and played by Steve Weiner, but he brings in many guests, including Chris Barber, who plays all the drums, Ember Belladonna on flute on three of the tracks, John Hernandez on hardcore vocals on track three, Paul Shiok doing a guitar solo on track 5, and Alex Loach doing high harsh vocals on track 6. Each song title on this album spectrum is a color. It starts and ends with songs that are short, just over 1 minute in length, called Yellow and Green, that feature acoustic guitar and flutes and sound beautiful, happy, and hopeful. From the first and last track on the album, you wouldn't think it's a black metal album at all. You'd think it's more of a folky, classical flute acoustic guitar, post-rock, relaxation, ambient kind of sound. Um, but then the second track comes in, and it's the first to feature electric guitars and vocals. The vocals start off like a clean choir. It's in a 6/8 time signature. And then the first harsh black metal vocals don't kick in until 2.5 minutes into track 2. And they sound really intense and emotional. The first, second, and last tracks on this album all feature Canadian flute player Ember Belladonna, who helps bring a beauty and folk element to the tracks. And it's really hard to compare this music to other artists, but I think people who like progressive black metal, like Enslaved, Eson, and Xanthocroid, but with a lot of folk influence, like how Borknagar brings folk into their black metal, as well as some traditional heavy metal influences where some guitar parts sound like Iron Maiden, but also even some classical and cinematic sounding moments, some ambient and some post-rock sounding moments. This is something you have to check out if you like black metal, prog, or post-rock. It's only 31 minutes long as well, so it flies by. And another one that I'm gonna have to put right away into my excellent tier. It's great that the first two albums of 2025. Oh, I wrote 24 on all these dates, didn't I? I'm just in the habit. These are all 2025. Um, it's great that the first two albums that I listened to this year are both excellent right out of the gate. I'm very impressed with them both. I look forward to listening to them several more times. And we're off to a great start here in January. And now for some that I haven't heard yet, let's talk about things that are coming out January 10th. The Halo Effect is releasing March of the Unheard, the second album by this Swedish melodic death metal band. They're a super group formed by former members of In Flames. So definitely check this out if you like In Flames. Their first album by Halo Effect was very good for me, but I didn't go back to it much. I'm hoping they do even better on this one. The first album was, yeah, very good. Like, definitely worth listening to if you like melodic death metal, but it didn't really break new ground. It kind of harkened back to the past. But if that's what you're looking for, if you want to hear more old school classic sounding melodic death metal, this will be for you. Check out March of the Unheard by the Halo Effect. Next, I'm going to be listening to SKYLIMIT's EP called Designed to Lose. This is a multinational metalcore band. It's melodic metalcore with alternative metal, post-hardcore, and pop influences. I guess you could call this a supergroup. It features members from Canada, the US, and the UK. It features Lauren Babick of Red Handed Denial on vocals. So definitely something that I'll check out because I always love her vocals, mostly in Red Handed Denial. I've also heard her working Crazy 88, which is great. And now she's got this other project, SKYLIMIT. So I'm there for it just for on that alone. But it also features YouTuber Bradley Hall on guitar, among others. And yeah, I watched a lot of his YouTube videos in the past, and he's a great guitar player. I've heard some of his thrash metal bands. I forget what they're called, but I've listened to his thrash metal band, and it was pretty good and fun. And now I'm curious to hear how he plays guitar in a melodic metalcore band. It's not typically the style that you hear him play, but he's a great guitar player. So interested to hear this EP, Designed to Lose by SKYLIMIT. And I think this band formed in like a YouTube reality YouTube collaborative like mansion reality show Battle of the Bands kind of contest where they brought a bunch of YouTube musicians and creators to a mansion together for like a week or something and made the bands. I think that's the origin story. I remember watching that video. I think that's where they all kind of all the members of this band came together. So if that sounds good to you, check out Design to Lose by SKYLIMIT. Next up is Franz Ferdinand and their album The Human Fear, the sixth album by this band from the UK. And this is indie rock. It's got a bit of post-punk, dance, art rock, and new wave influences. They're actually a Scottish band, and it's their sixth album. I remember them for their big commercial breakthrough hit called Take Me Out, which I really liked, but I never got deep into this band. I don't really remember much else that they've done. I may have heard another song here and there, but I haven't done a deep dive on them. But I'm curious just to hear what they're doing here on this album. So I'll be checking it out. If that sounds good to you, check out The Human Fear by Franz Ferdinand. And lastly, on my list for January 10th right now is Ringo Starr with his album called Look Up. It's his 21st solo album. Of course, he's the former drummer for the legendary British band The Beatles. But here he's going to be doing something different than what he usually does. This is like a country rock album, but I think it's going to have some pop influences and be pretty catchy. Um, his solo work can be very hit or miss for me. I don't know that much of it, but I'm not super impressed by it. I love some of the songs that he's written in the Beatles, like Octopus's Garden and Yellow Submarine and a few others, but I think it's fairly well known that of the Beatles, Ringo Starr's probably the weakest of the four songwriters in the Beatles. He could still write a good song, and I love the Beatles, so I figured I'm going to check this out just because of my love for the Beatles. That's Look Up by Ringo Starr. I don't have super high expectations, but maybe if I go in with low expectations, I'll be blown away and I'll really love it. If you like the Beatles or if you like Ringo Starr, definitely check this out. Look Up by Ringo Starr. Now, what's coming out on January 17th? I've got two on my list that I plan to listen to so far, and I'm sure I'll learn about other releases as the month goes on. So I might end up listening to more than just these 15 albums this month. But January is also usually a slow month without too many releases. So maybe I will only listen to these. But Eidola is one that I'm really excited for. Uh, Possibly the one on this list that I'm most excited for, although there's another one that could be really interesting too coming up. Um, so Eidola's Mend. This is the sixth album by this American band. It's post-hardcore with progressive rock, experimental rock, progressive metal, and pop influences. I love everything Eidola has put out so far, so I'm really excited for this. And their last album was actually my favorite post-hardcore album of 2024. Um, I feel like they might be changing directions a bit on this. The singles that I've heard for Mend are a lot more accessible and less hardcore. So maybe they're going a bit more in a poppy pop direction. But they still have some of their signature sound. I'm curious to hear where they go with this. If that sounds good to you, check out Mend by Eidola. And Teramaze is releasing an EP called Desire, Colors, and Lust. This is an Australian progressive metal band, and they consistently and regularly put out excellent music. Pretty much everything they do. I've actually recently finished listening to their entire discography, and all of their full-length albums are excellent. Just consistent quality. Their first two, though, they put out two back in the 90s, a little rougher around the edges, but not excellent work. Just it's good, but it's Their first two aren't as great, but then they really hit their stride and they just crank out excellent album after excellent album. They're never pushing too many boundaries or going into like making near masterpieces or masterpieces, but they're just consistently excellent. And if that sounds good to you, like if you like Dream Theater and they're pretty catchy. They're very catchy progressive metal actually. Um, Kind of like the band that I mentioned at the beginning of this video, Acacia Ridge. If you like that kind of thing, you definitely need to check out Teramaze and their EP Desire, Colors, and Lust. Now, what's coming out on January 24th? Oni is releasing an EP called Genesis. This is a Canadian metalcore project, kind of progressive melodic metalcore, some gent, some alternative metal, groove metal, and pop influences in there. And this project, Oni, is formed by the great Canadian vocalist Jake Oni. And on this one, he's working with YouTuber Jared Dines on guitar now, who's also a great guitar player. And I thought Oni's last album, The Silver Line from 2023, was excellent. And The Loathing Light from 2022 is very good. So he's got a pretty good discography so far, and I'm curious to hear if he maintains the quality on this one or if he can even take a step up in quality. That would really impress me. So if that sounds good to you, check out Genesis by Oni. Then we have on the same day, January 24th, Wardruna releasing Birna, the sixth album by this Norwegian folk band. It's dark Nordic neo-folk with ambient influences. Wardruna makes very primal rhythmic and percussive music with chant-like trance-inducing vocals, both male and female vocalists in this band. For fans of bands like Heilung, it sounds like you're listening to an ancient Viking satanic ritual, but it's somehow also beautiful and so well composed. If that sounds good to you, check out Birna by Wardruna. Then I'll be checking out Avatarium and their album Between You, God, the Devil, and the Dead. The sixth album by this Swedish band. It's doom metal with prog rock, psychedelic rock, stoner rock, and occult rock influences. I've heard their fifth album before, and I thought that was excellent. They have strong female vocals. The band was founded by the Candlemass songwriter Leif Edling, but he's no longer part of the band. It's epic and dark sounding for fans of Black Sabbath, Ghost, and Blue Oyster Cult. Definitely check it out if you like those bands and want to hear kind of what those would sound like with a female vocalist and leaning a bit more into the progressive side and having some more symphonic and ambient elements mixed in. Also, if you're a fan of Catatonia and Oceans of Slumber, you might like this, but you won't get any screaming vocals here from Avatarium. It's all nice, beautiful singing. Check that out if that sounds good to you. Between You, God, the Devil, and the Dead by Avatarium. And on the same day, January 24th, Bumblefoot is releasing his album Bumblefoot Returns, the ninth solo album by this American guitar virtuoso. This is instrumental hard rock with alternative metal and progressive metal influences. He's a true guitar shredder. He was one of the um, two lead guitarists in Guns N' Roses from 2006 until 2014. And he performed on their sixth album, Chinese Democracy. He was also the guitarist for the supergroup Sons of Apollo, and he's currently the guitarist of the supergroup Whom Gods Destroy, and probably put out one of the best guitar performances of 2024 with that album. He was also the guitarist and vocalist for the band Asia from 2019 to 2022. On this one, I expect some insane guitar virtuosity from him here. His work with Whom Gods Destroy in 2024 was just mind-blowing. I love when he does fretless guitar solos, so I hope he has some of those on here. If that sounds good to you, check out Bumblefoot Returns by Bumblefoot. I'm not usually big into instrumental music, but I think he is so insanely talented that he can probably keep me entertained for an entire instrumental album. Now, the last day of January, January 31st, I've got two on my list that I plan to listen to. The first is by All That Remains, and it's called Antifragile, the 10th album by this American metalcore band. They're melodic metalcore. They started off with some melodic death metal influences early in their career, but then they went and brought in more of hard rock, heavy metal, and pop influences into their later career. This will be the first All That Remains album not to feature founding guitarist Oli Herbert, who unfortunately died in 2018. So I'm a bit worried about this album because I do feel like Oli was the best part of the band. This is the other album besides Eidola that I'm most excited for because it could either be really amazing or it could be really bad. So I actually don't know what to expect. Um, since Ollie Herbert was the best part of the band for me, I'm a bit worried about it, but they got a solid replacement guitarist, Jason Richardson. If this album can be as good as my favorite three album run from All That Remains, which is The Fall of Ideals in 2006, Overcome in 2008, and For We Are Many in 2010, if it can be as good as those, it could be a contender for the best metalcore album of the year. But they've also released an album in the past that I thought was just terrible in 2017 called Madness, where they went more alternative and brought in pop and country influences and just a really cringeworthy way for me. So if this is like that, then it could actually be among the worst and most disappointing albums of the year. So I'm hoping it'll be great. I'm expecting it'll probably fall somewhere in the middle and won't be a near masterpiece or anything, but hopefully also won't be bad. It'll probably just be pretty good. The singles have been very good at least, but not as great as the tracks on those three near masterpiece albums I mentioned that they put out in the past. But if that sounds good to you, check out Antifragile about All That Remains. And last one on my list for today's video is the Night Flight Orchestra putting out Give Us the Moon, the seventh album by this Swedish hard rock band. This is very kind of AOR and classic rock influenced. This was a band that was started by Bjorn Strid and David Anderson from the great melodic death metal band Soilwork. Unfortunately, the guitarist David Anderson passed away in 2022, so this will actually be the first album without him, which is kind of strange, seeing as there's two bands, All That Remains and the Night Flight Orchestra, who both lost their guitarists, both releasing their first album without their guitarists on the same day. Very strange coincidence. I think it's a coincidence. Hopefully, the Night Flight Orchestra can maintain their greatness despite losing their guitarist, David Anderson, and his unfortunate passing. Check this out if you're a fan of Toto, Kiss, Ghost, Boston, Supertramp. Uh, it's much more accessible, catchy hard rock AOR um, band like those bands rather than anything on the metal side like Soilwork, even though the members are from Soilwork. This sounds a lot more like those AOR bands. They don't do any screaming vocals here. It's just all catchy singing. If that sounds good to you, check out Give Us the Moon by the Night Flight Orchestra. And that's it for these 15 albums coming out in January 2025 that I plan to check out. Let me know if you know of any other great albums coming out in January 2025 down in the comments, and which of these albums are you most looking forward to? And stay tuned for my next video. Peace out.